Hi, Josh.
What's up, Aya?
Not much. How are you?
I'm all right. You want to hear
That's good.
something? Actually, first, how are you? Because I know you don't like to answer that
I already said
question.
I'm fine. I think I said I'm fine
Did you
already.
say that? I don't even.
I
There's a
feel like
history.
I did.
Really? I didn't even. I didn't even
Okay,
ask.
I'm saying it now. I am fine. Thanks for asking.
Well, that's good to know.
How are you?
I'm doing something very interesting.
What
Starting
is it?
tomorrow,
Tell me. Tell us. Tell us all.
I'm participating in a clinical trial for 2 weeks, starting
Ooh.
tomorrow. Like I'm going away at this clinic, and I'm gonna be there for 2 weeks to test this experimental drug.
Oh, you're a human lab rat.
I'm gonna be a lab rat for 2 weeks. Yeah,
Great. That's good. I'm glad you're contributing to society finally.
that's right. I'm totally doing it for society and
Oh, are you, not for some other thing?
not for the not at all for the money that they're going to give me to do
Oh, they're
this.
giving you money. I thought you were just doing it out of the kindness of your heart,
Um,
altruistically.
ooh.
But turns out there was some.
Look, I'm happy that I'm also I'm happy that it's also potentially helping people. It's actually a drug for um it's an HIV drug, which it doesn't I don't have HIV.
Not yet. No.
No, they're not going to give me HIV. Actually, it scared my girlfriend. I told her, she's like, "Do you have HIV?" I'm like, "No, it's not.
That'd
It's a
be pretty
study."
messed up if you hadn't told her yet.
It would be.
Actually, that would be a crime. That would be a crime.
That would be pretty criminal. Yeah. No, I'm basically. It's actually studying the interaction between two drugs.
Mm.
They haven't yet studied how these two HIV drugs interact, and they want to study it in healthy people. I think these drugs will also be used not just to treat people with HIV, but prevent HIV,
Oh, cool.
which is interesting. So yeah, this
Nice.
could really help people. But yeah,
Yeah, that's
they're
great.
gonna pay me money, and I
Yeah.
like that. So
Yeah. So
I know this is pretty much a great segue, isn't it?
I thought so, right?
That's a
Yeah.
pretty good
So
segue.
finally appreciating my segue.
You're the segue queen after all.
Oh, thank you. I'll take my crown here.
Looks great on you.
Does it look good? Oh,
Yeah,
thanks.
it looks good.
Really brings out my eyes.
It does.
So welcome back to Adulthood Friends. This is the discussion based podcast where two former childhood acquaintances, now friends, discuss the things that adverb Josh.
Well, come on, you give us an adverb this time.
Oh, me? I
Yeah,
perpetually?
perpetually awesome. That's your adverb of the week.
Yeah,
Discuss the things that perpetually
matter.
matter.
And I'm Aya.
I'm Josh.
And today, our topic, as we alluded to earlier, and as you already know because you already clicked on this link that has the title in it, we're going to be talking about selfishness and self-interest, or selfishness versus self-interest.
Hmm.
So what's the difference between the two? Is self-interest a bad thing? And is it possible to be selfless or completely altruistic? Is that a possibility for you and in general?
Those are some good questions, Aya.
Thanks. I riffed some of them. Some of them are written down. So
Yeah.
I maybe I didn't need to tell you all that. Should we get into it
Let's
before I
get
get more
into it.
awkward?
No, let's get. Well,
Okay.
we can always get more awkward.
I can always get more awkward. I just need to stop myself from talking. Okay, music time. And we're back. Hi again, Josh.
What's up?
Not much. So we already kind of started talking about this, but do you think it's possible to be altruistic?
Do I personally, Josh Littman, think
Yeah,
it's possible to be altruistic?
completely altruistic. And maybe we should define that first. Maybe we should define things
That's what I
first.
was gonna
Maybe
say.
we should restart this
No.
whole post music thing.
That's actually a good. I think it's good to ask it that way because that's what people often ask this question without defining it, and I think that's a big problem because is it possible to be altruistic? A lot of people think that means well being selfless, and the real question in that is it possible to be totally selfless?
Hmm.
If not, then does that mean you can't be altruistic, or are we just defining altruism a little too extreme? In my opinion, altruism doesn't mean being completely selfless.
Right.
I think altruism is doing something for somebody else. But if you ask me, I don't think it's possible when it comes to an intended action. I don't think it's possible to be completely selfless. And I just want to say ahead of time, I don't think that makes us like bad people or that's a bad thing. I think that's natural and that can be a good thing. But Yeah.
Hmm. So I should clarify when I say is it possible to be completely altruistic, what I mean is that the things that you do altruistically, so let's say giving $1 to
Hmm.
a person who looks like they need it, are you doing it purely out of the goodness of your heart that supposedly exists, or is it for other reasons that you may or may not be aware of? Right? Is that a better
Mm.
way of kind of phrasing it?
Or that the other people aren't aware of, right? Is it somewhere? Is it something malicious? I mean, it's contextual, depends from person to person. But I would argue that again, no, none of this is completely selfless.
Okay.
But I think it comes down to there's a difference here though between self-interest
Yes.
and selfishness. And
Right.
that's why we have the verses in the title.
So let's differentiate between those.
Okay. What's an example, right?
Okay.
Let me ask you, what's an example of selfishness?
So like in general, I would say selfishness is something that you so in terms of actions, it would be something that you do for yourself that's done at the expense of others or with no
Mm,
regard to others.
mm.
So it's like I don't care what they want. It can be something unethical. It can be, being a scam artist,
I
not
like that without
caring.
regard for others. I think that's an important element of selfishness.
Yeah, there's no consideration for others.
Hmm.
And I think self interest can be either negative or positive. Selfishness is generally
Yeah.
negative. Self interest can be either. So it could be something that does hurt other people, but it could also just be something that means you're taking care of yourself first before you're able to take care of others. So that's a healthy self interest.
Hmm.
Kind of a classic example of that one is, when you're on a flight and it tells you you should take, and I think you've also used this example before,
Mm,
that you should put on your own oxygen before you help others. So
right.
if there's like a kid next to you and like a frail old woman, you don't help them put theirs on first because you'll probably pass out and then you won't be any good for anyone. You help yourself first. And
Hmm.
once you can breathe, you can probably help both of them.
That's actually the most beneficial to them because once you're
Exactly.
secure, then you can help. You can better help.
Right. So that's healthy self interest. Yeah.
Yes. Although I would argue that even more actions that don't, are self-interested and not necessarily a negative thing
Mm,
than that. Like that one's a pretty obvious one. Like you're doing
that's an
something for
obvious one.
yourself. That's something you're literally doing something for yourself. That's in the benefit of everybody. Yes.
Right.
But like, yeah, like if I were to give you a definition, for example, of selfishness, right? I think a classic one is there's a whole bunch of cookies in the cookie jar
Mm,
and nobody's looking. You go and you take all the cookies for yourself, right?
mm.
So nobody else can have any cookies. You're doing it without consideration or regard for others. That's selfish.
Unless like they're all diabetic. Right.
suddenly, suddenly
And
you're doing it because
suddenly,
suddenly that could be okay. But we're
sorry,
talking
no,
about
I'm
this.
we're
Yeah, no, this is the
being
selfish.
serious.
Yeah, the selfish example is you're doing it without regard. Then you would be doing it with regard for others, wouldn't you? In that regard.
Right. So selfishness is everyone wanted a cookie and you snuck in and stole them all and then lied about it. That's a selfish,
That's an
shitty
example of
thing to
being
do.
selfish. Yeah.
The self-interest one is everyone else actually has like pre-diabetes and you're doing them a favor by taking them out of the house. I
Yeah.
don't know. Sorry. I just
Yes.
hijacked your
No,
example.
that's a perfect. That's great. And now let me take it a step further. Like what I was saying before. I would argue that if you say no, you guys have the cookies. I'm not going to have any cookies right now. I mean, you guys definitely want them more than me.
Ugh.
Feel free to have the cookies. That is also self-interested. Do you see what I mean?
So that's what someone thinks is selfless,
Exactly.
but
This is an
is
example of
self-interest.
exactly. People think that's selfless. Oh my God. He didn't take
I
any
think it's
cookies for
annoying.
himself. What do you think
I
is
think it's
annoying?
annoying. Yeah, I find it annoying. Like, fucking eat a cookie. We know you want a cookie. Just
No.
eat one. Now we have to feel bad. Like, well, thank you. Thank you for sacrificing yourself. And now we get to enjoy the cookies and you sit there and suffer. Like, that's horrible. Although I understand, I think it's coming from a good place.
Okay.
So can it really be selfish if I think that's well intentioned. They
Well,
just
I'm
don't
not saying it's
get it
selfish,
yet.
but what I'm going to say is that I think it's self-interested, even to offer up something to other people in place of yourself. For example, okay, so this is where it gets a little mind gamey, but think about it, right? Actually, I'll just say it. I'll say this blanket statement. I believe that any intended action that you're doing is either for the gaining, at least, of a good feeling or the avoidance of a bad one,
Okay, fair enough.
right? So in this case, would you say that the person giving away those cookies is doing it because a little bit because it feels good, it feels
Right. Okay.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
They'll feel good doing this.
That's true.
They
Yeah.
think it's the right thing to do, and they consider themselves to be a good person.
Mm.
And by acting in accordance with the character they perceive themselves to be, that makes them feel good.
Right.
So would you argue that that is self-interested?
I guess so. I think I've kind of agreed with this before without knowing it, because I was thinking like I volunteer for self-interested reasons. I do it because it feels good. I feel
Feels good,
better.
right? Now, here's a question. I think when you look at this, it makes sense, right? We tend to do things because they feel good or we don't want to feel bad, right?
Mm.
But is that a bad thing that we do things because they make us feel good? I would argue no. I would argue you should do things for that reason.
It's
If
not
it feels good to do
always
good, if it feels good to consider other people,
right.
that's the best thing for society.
Yes, but not everyone feels good doing good things for. Well, that's not true. I shouldn't say that.
Well, not everyone, that's true. There are people out there who, but why do we, let me ask you a question. Why do we feel good when we do good for others?
Because we get to feel like we helped.
And why? Why do we feel that way?
Because I don't know, other people. I feel like you. Oh, it's our empathy. It's empathy. He's like mouthing. You're mouthing the word. It's empathy.
Empathy. No, right? Isn't that
Empathy.
true? We have empathy and therefore we feel
Okay.
other people's pain. So we will, honestly, we will feel bad if they feel bad. And we feel good when they feel good.
What if what we do doesn't automatically make someone else feel good, but we know that ultimately it is what's good for them and we still do it? Is that not altruistic then? If we're not,
I mean,
or it doesn't involve empathy because.
I like to not define, I just want to say again, I'd like to not
Okay,
define
right.
altruism as complete
Okay.
selflessness. I think that the definition, like doing good with regard for others, you know, as your
Right.
primary concern, I think that's altruism to me.
You know, I think there's a Simpsons episode about this. Is there not?
There's a Simpsons episode about everything at this point.
There is a Simpsons episode about everything.
Literally everything. They predicted the future now.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Numerous times.
Oh, you know what? Oh, man. I think it's a Friends episode.
Oh, Friends.
I can't believe I just got those confused. So Phoebe is arguing that there are nice, like that you can do nice things for people. And then like when she does them, she's like, oh, I feel so. And then she's like, oh no, I feel good because I did something nice. So now it means that it's not like a selfless thing. So she like made herself do something that was nice that made her feel terrible just to prove
Just to prove.
that there was, yeah, just to prove. Although I don't know that it proved anything.
But then here's the thing, that's going through like little mental mind, you know,
Mental gymnastics.
yeah. Because you have a belief system in your head that I'm not a good person if I don't do good things selflessly.
Oh, so what she's doing is actually in her own self-interest because she wants to see herself as a good person?
Exactly.
Ooh, I'm smart.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Please take that out. I was just like really proud that I figured out what
We're
you
gonna
wanted.
leave that in. That's great.
No, I hate when you edit for that reason. I can't say stupid things.
And I'm going to be
until you
editing
edit
while
more.
I'm at this clinical trial. This is great.
Yeah. So in the background, we'll just hear like the screams of people undergoing medical treatments.
Let me go. Let me out of here.
Now I'm rethinking things. So my argument, or not argument, but I was going to say that like I think that people kind of have these higher order ideals sometimes. So like the belief that I don't know, that the world should be better.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter if the thing that I do makes me feel bad. I know that ultimately there is a goal.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people are more capable of doing selfless, thankless things in order to like in service of those higher order ideals. So like if you think that the world should be more equal and you go and do things that you don't necessarily, I don't have an exact example, which is probably not helpful, but
Giving charity,
but like something that doesn't even get a thank you and like people are miserable about it. Okay, like
anonymous charity giving.
Anonymous charity giving. Okay.
Yeah.
And not being able to tell anyone about it and not getting any kind of like that's a little bit more.
But are you
because
getting a good feeling from doing it?
Right.
I'd argue if you don't get that good feeling or you're not avoiding a bad one, you won't do it, generally speaking.
What if it's a thing that you think is good, but there are other things that make it, yeah.
But again, I think there's a part of our brains that's saying, okay, so that's bad then. You're doing it because you want to get a good feeling. No, that's like the bare minimum.
Yeah.
Right? We often are more likely to do things that do that plus something else. Let's be honest, right?
Okay.
And even when I used to go to synagogue back at home, One of the things that really drew me, actually still does to this day, is if there's food.
At synagogue?
Yeah,
It's
if
like
I
the
get
word. What, you want like pickled herring? What do you go to synagogue for food?
what do you mean? Oh, you okay? I'm talking about like Chabad, where they have like a lot of food.
Oh, I never went to like. Okay, so that's like the religious people that get you in with the food. That's
When you say that,
just
I
for
mean,
people who don't know what we're talking. Like that's
yeah,
essentially what they do.
you
They
go to
know
this
that's
like
they give
event,
you free alcohol and food, and in Josh's
yeah.
case, they also give you water bottles that I've seen you with, probably, right?
they give
So
they give me so much. No, they're good friends of mine too, and I love going
okay,
over there just to. I
yeah, yeah,
mean,
yeah,
yeah, it's
blah blah
good to
blah.
be
But
Jewish and be a part of all that, but yeah, I get a lot of good food.
oh, okay,
So it's not just one thing, you get the feeling of maybe I'm doing good by participating. Now, this is different. This is like when you talk about religious stuff,
but that's
what's
what.
considered to be good is a little more like we're talking about like doing something that's obviously good for other people, but then there's like good in the eyes of the Lord,
So that's what
right?
I mean. Yeah, that I guess I should have just used that in higher, like the higher order ideals that I'm talking about. It's like when people do things for a god, or they just do it because they feel like that's what they're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
Where's that coming from? Is that also self-interest? Because there isn't always
Yes,
a reward for it in
of
every
course there is.
religion.
There's two different things. Well, again, we're not. Let's talk about Christianity, for example, right?
Well,
We
yeah,
said
that's
the gaining of a good feeling or the avoidance of a bad one. And what's the
uh,
ultimate bad feeling that everyone's trying
burning
to
in
avoid?
hell.
Burning in hell, right? They don't
Yeah.
want to burn in hell, so they're doing a lot of
Uh,
things to avoid this bad feeling,
I don't
right? They
like
want
that reasoning
and they
though.
want to
That's not
potentially go to heaven and be close to God. That's the gaining of a
okay.
good feeling, right?
Yeah.
Anything we're still doing, if we're doing it for other people, we're being told this is how you get closer to God, and that's the.
Right.
So I would argue it's. I think there's a self interest in all of those things.
Right.
But again, I don't. That's not necessarily a bad thing to have that. So again, we start looking for it too. Like I'm sure we're going to keep looking. Are there any selfless actions?
Yeah.
One of the most classic ones that people like to say, okay, what about that soldier that has split second to react?
Mm.
And there's a grenade that is thrown on the ground in front of all of his fellow troops,
Yeah.
and he jumps on the grenade to save everyone. Is that not a selfless act? Now, I don't want to like disparage anybody who's done this. I think that's actually that's like an amazing thing to do. And by most of our definitions, that is a selfless thing to do.
I'd be pissed if that was like my husband or something though. I'd be like, what the how about you let someone else jump on a grenade, okay? No, that's terrible.
Right? Okay, well, you would. But still, that being said, like, okay, that's a heroic thing to do. Is it completely selfless? Again, I would argue no, there is an element of self interest in there. They said, but he didn't even have time to make the decision. He just did it. That's who he was. And I'd argue, okay, maybe prior to this, he understood himself to be this giving type of person who is selfless, who would help people. And if that situation ever arose, he would do that. And he lived his life prior with this good feeling, knowing he was this type of person. And as soon as it was tested, he reacted to that. But then again, that was for a gaining of a good feeling, even if it was prior to the thing happening, that he like built up
Mm.
this belief that he had to then act on. Otherwise, if he didn't act on it, he knew immediately. Again, this happens very fast. He knew immediately this is something he would feel bad about because
Right, he'd have to live with his
he'd have to
decision.
live with that decision exactly to not do
Right.
that. Right. Immediately, it was like we say like a split second sort of thing. But again, we're talking about intention. Again, as long as there was a little bit of time to choose there for a second, this is an intentional action. If it's not intentional, I don't think this like factors in. We're talking about doing something, an intended action.
Yeah, and so even if it is a split second thing, even if he didn't think about it, let's say no part of him thought about it, I think you do practice the type of person
Mm-hmm.
that you become. Like, so if you're so used to doing things in thinking about what would happen if you didn't do what seemed like the right thing, then you
Mm-hmm.
would automatically do the thing that seemed like the right thing
Then it's habit, right?
in any situation. Exactly, it's habit.
But then it's also taking away in the moment a little bit from being an intended action in that moment. If it's really you didn't have time to think. If you had any time
Well,
to think, then it is an intended action. Then you're still doing it for the gaining of a good feeling or the avoidance of a bad one. Is that primarily what you're doing it for?
mm,
No. And that's why we're like, wow, that's amazing. I personally think for you to recognize that it's in your best self interest to do good for others, that's goodness right there.
mm.
To act on that empathy.
I mean, it is, some people could argue that, I'm not arguing it, but
Some
just
people.
to play devil's advocate a little bit here, like people could argue that it's more, if you aren't driven by helping people, then isn't it in your best self-interest to be very selfish and do everything for yourself, but just hide that part of you so people don't see it?
Okay, so if you're not driven by that, so you're saying like a psychopath.
Yeah, I'm saying like a psychopath. Yeah.
So yeah, so I would argue that a psychopath doesn't have
Empathy.
empathy. Yeah. So if they don't have empathy,
Sorry, I'm
then
looking at the gesturing. You know
I'm
this
like,
word. Come
it's our
on.
thing. It's our thing on this
Yeah,
podcast.
it's our
We're the
thing.
empathy
Yeah.
podcast. I would argue that yeah, if we don't, if you don't have empathy, then yeah, you're not going to get a good feeling or avoid a bad one by doing good for others in that same way.
Mm.
And then I would argue, yeah, you are a what's that word? Like psychological egoist, or what's the one? Is that you're an ethical egoist or something like that?
Well, no, an ethical egoist does no, neither of those really would encompass.
No?
Well, psychological egoism is the one, it's the idea that you can't act out of anything that isn't self-interest. That's
Right. Oh,
basically
it's
what
the
you're
theory that
arguing.
yeah, people act out of self-interest and they're incapable of acting altruistically.
Exactly.
Right. And ethical egoism is you believe that you should act only in your own. It's like that we
Right.
should
That
act
it's the better choice or the most ethical choice is actually to act in your
in
own
your own
self-interest.
self-interest, to not
Yeah.
be
So
altruistic,
I mean,
basically.
they're not like they can work. They can both work, can't they?
Right. But I would say I would think that that ethical egoism makes more sense for a psychopath, right? In a way. The reason I'm thinking about this is because when I was in my undergrad, I actually wrote a paper on this. And it
Oh.
literally, the title of this paper was The Stupidity of Trying to Prove Ethical Egoism Through Psychological Egoism.
Oh my God. And what'd you get on that paper, Josh?
I did really well on this paper. I
I've
did
never
really
written
well.
stupidity in the title of a paper.
I got
I wish
away
I
with it.
had.
It was a philosophy
Yeah.
course. I got away with it
Right.
because
Yeah.
just as like a belief of mine, but like, and I'm sorry for anybody out there who loves philosophy, and I did really well in philosophy in undergrad, but I believe a lot of it is kind of bullshit. I'm not talking about like ethical philosophy, like, you know, whether abortions are good or bad. That stuff is like, that's good dialogue to have. I'm talking about that logical type of philosophy where it's like, you know, if A is B and B is C, then shouldn't C be A? And then people like argue over this forever and ever. And then you realize, oh, they're just defining a word in there differently between A to B and B to C. And the word is, even though they're using the same word, that's why C isn't the same as A by the time it comes around. Anyways, there's just these definitional problems. So I think a lot of it is stupid.
Yeah. But Josh, how will we ever understand the mysteries of human psychology from a philosophical standpoint without it? I don't know, actually. The meaning of
no,
life. How will
there are
we ever
certain,
figure out the meaning of
it's good
life
to look
without
at
it?
it, but I think the conversation is over once you realize there's a definitional discrepancy.
Right, but
So,
you're talking about undergrad courses. What about like being a philosopher? Isn't that useful?
then they've gone too far down the rabbit hole by that point,
You don't think
and they don't even
philosophers
realize that they're.
are helpful to us?
I think philosophy is what we had before we had science.
Josh, how could you say such a thing?
I mean, not in all ways, but it's kind of like psychology is now what we have before we better understand neuroscience.
But science can't just exist without some kind of morality, and
Okay,
that
moral
doesn't come.
philosophy is more. I'm not talking about all types of philosophy, just like
What are
logical
you talking?
philosophy.
Okay,
In fact,
logic. So you're talking about one specific type of philosophy because moral
yeah,
philosophy is important. What about?
sure. That's why I said like if it's about like whether
Okay,
abortions are okay or not, that's like moral philosophy.
okay. And what about
Yeah.
like? All right, you know what? We'll save. Is so side.
Okay.
We'll have
Anyway,
another episode on
yeah.
this. Okay.
Anyway, I
Yay.
wrote this big paper
Okay.
on psychological egoism and ethical egoism, which all relates to self-interest. So I was trying to like refer to it, but the truth is I don't remember all those
Yeah.
big words anymore.
I mean, none of us remember most of the things we've written. At least in my
Yeah.
case, I'll read something I wrote like months ago, and I'm like, "Wow, who wrote
Like, oh,
this?
that was me.
That was me.
No,
It makes no sense." No.
but I will say that my point of this paper still was that in general, going back to that definitional thing I was just saying, people tend to define altruism differently when they're talking about this stuff. And that's kind of one of the big issues. A lot of people think altruism is this complete selflessness.
Right.
You know, but if you don't define it that way, I think it makes a lot more sense because I don't believe there's a complete selflessness in the sense that any intended action we do for the gaining of a good feeling or the avoidance of a bad one.
Okay.
So there's always a self-interest involved. But it's good to realize that doing good is good for us. I think that's the goodness right there.
So is that the takeaway right now?
Basically, it's to be empathetic.
Oh
you
God
know.
damn it. Every time it was just like, what's the end? What's the end? Can I tell you something?
Yeah.
Just a story. It's not really a story, but my mom listens to this podcast, as you and our listeners already know. And I
Hi, Maura
was
Nikki.
and I was at like their house, my parents' house, and I forget. I really wish I remembered what exactly we were saying, but at one point, like we were looking for the word, and my mom just like raised her eyebrows and was like, Aya, what's the cause?" And I was like, "What?" She's like, and I was like, "Empathy?" She's like, "Yeah, like you say on your podcast." So basically, what you just did to me like a minute ago, Josh, you were reading and you're not paying attention to my
I am paying
story.
attention. I'm listening
No,
to you. What are
you're
you talking
not.
about?
You did not respond. You did not respond. What happened? What happened?
I
Repeat my
accidentally
story
came
back to
I
me.
accidentally came across, okay, I'll be
Yeah,
honest. I accidentally came
I
across
know.
the definition of
Yeah.
altruism that I was talking about the whole time.
I like that you tried to lie to me. I am a teacher. I know when someone's paying attention.
I'm sorry, Dr. Ishai.
Yeah,
And not even
apologize.
worse, it's about your mother who I respect greatly.
I can't believe you ignored the story.
No,
Yeah.
no.
I didn't even say it properly the first time. I just kind of stumbled through it because I could tell you weren't paying attention. I feed off of the empathetic, empathically feed off of someone's reaction to my story. So if they're not paying attention halfway through, I lose my focus. Yeah, I appreciate your sad face now, but oh, stop. Don't look like that. Josh, come on. Come on. It's fine. Okay, the story is basically for some reason my mom and I we were talking about something and she was like, it comes down to, and like prompted
Empathy.
me. Yeah. And I was like, oh yeah. She's like, yeah, like you guys always say on your podcast. So basically she referenced
Oh,
us.
she referenced our podcast.
She referenced our podcast. Okay, that's the end of the story.
No, that's great. I like this is what we're putting into the world. I think that's the
Yeah. Isn't that
yeah.
nice?
Not I don't want to put into the world this part where I am not listening to you because
Okay,
that's
I
the
should.
opposite. I wasn't empathizing
Josh,
with you.
I'm not mad. I understand you found something interesting and you were like, okay, I have a second to look at this while she's telling your story. I'm sure I'll pay attention by the time that she finishes. I understand what was going on in your head. But then it was a really short story that wasn't actually much of a
Yeah.
story. It
Do
was
you
more just
understand
like a
because
thing
it's
that
something that
happened.
you do quite often yourself on this podcast?
I don't pay attention to you. But okay, I appreciate you calling me out on that because I totally have done it before, but I didn't know that you noticed. But yes, Josh, I apologize for all the times I haven't
No,
listened to you and
I'm
for all the
sorry.
times I won't listen to you because I'm sure it'll happen again. And I forgive you for not paying attention to my story that wasn't really a story.
It actually honestly is really nice to know that this sentiment, I mean, to your mother, but to anybody who's listening, that is to me the most important thing to get across is
Yeah.
how important empathy is. And even like it seems to be the answer to all of our questions on every podcast. I don't know if you guys
Yeah.
have been listening, and I think it'll be the answer to most of them.
It was the answer to my thesis.
Was it?
Well, I think it wasn't the answer, but I remember it coming up in like in the conclusions because for me, like the only way to justify spending all this time on something is to show that like literature matters and these specific books matter because of like the empathetic response in the reader. Yeah, so
Mm,
I guess like it's not empathy was the answer, but
yeah,
basically
no, I see what you
it was
mean.
also the way I convinced myself to finish my. I was like, it matters, it matters. It's got some meaning behind it.
And I think that's when we talk about whether something matters or has meaning, it often comes down to empathy again, right?
Mm.
So yeah, so switching gears back here for a second.
Yeah, let's switch back.
So I would you agree with me that self-interest is kind of ubiquitous here? Like it's behind any intended action.
Mm.
Just let's get that out of the way, right?
Yeah, I think that's probably true.
Not the
Yeah,
primary thing, not the only thing, but like it has to be a factor
yeah,
generally. People generally
yeah,
don't. They need at least to feel good or to avoid feeling bad to do something.
right. And also to consider the fact that like even though that feels like it makes it a bad thing, or that feels like it takes away
Yes,
some kind of like purity
mhm.
to our altruistic acts because
It's
it's
not.
like, oh, you're actually doing it for yourself ultimately. It's not because
Yeah,
you're still doing those things.
yeah. And by the way, so the thing I was reading when I should have been listening to you
No, it's fine.
was the definition I had actually written. I was looking over my essay that I had written.
Oh,
I
okay.
know, I know. Because well,
Reading.
I just
I'm sorry. So you weren't even just like looking something. You were looking up your own words
I
while I was
know,
talking.
I know. It's even worse.
I can't believe you, Josh. No, it's okay.
So, anyways, the definition I had of altruism in here that I would stick
Mhm.
to is not like doing something completely selflessly, but actions that are intended for the benefit of others.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
If it's actions that are intended for the benefit of others, of course, Of course that exists. So we can acknowledge, though, that everything is self-interested and that it's not necessarily a bad thing. My question to you then is, do you feel like you're a pretty selfish person?
Selfish?
Selfish person.
What? But that's the selfish is someone kind of doing their own or
Doing things without regard for others. Do you ever, I'm not saying
yeah,
in general, but do you
at
feel
the
like you,
expense of others,
or
not
at
even
the,
just
or
at the
even worse,
expense
at
of
the expense
others
of
without
others?
regard for others, either one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you feel like that is you sometimes? I'm just asking. I don't, I'm
Sometimes?
not actually, I'm not accusing you.
No, I'm wondering. I'm trying to think. I think it's easier for me to be alone a lot of the time because I don't have to worry about that question as much.
Mm,
I don't know if that answers your
is that
question. I
selfish?
don't think
Is it
to stay
selfish not to?
alone.
Yeah,
What
think
am I
about it.
deprived?
You
Because
have
I'm
this
depriving people of my
incredible,
lovely company.
exactly. You're an incredible personality. You're super fun to be
Thanks,
around,
Josh.
and you'd rather be alone than share that with everybody. Then yeah, I think it's a little selfish, Aya.
I mean, when you put it that way, okay, I will grace people with my presence. No,
It's
I mean,
kind
I
of
don't
like
think that's,
asking someone on like a job interview to label their
yeah,
negatives, and they're like, "I'm
I'm
just too much of
just,
a perfectionist."
yeah, it's just like people love me so much that like I need to be alone a lot of the time so that they don't take away all my energy. No, that's not. If every time I went out, that was people's sentiment, like if people were like you and they were like, "Oh wow, Aya, you're so incredible. We think you're hilarious," then of course I'd go out more
They
often.
are like that. They're just doing that in their head.
You don't know what they're doing in their head.
I'm pretty sure other people think this of you too.
Well, I that's nice of you to say, but I don't think you know what is going on in other people's head.
So that's the reasoning for whether you would go out more or not.
No. I just get exhausted from company.
Yeah,
And
yeah. No,
I
you're a
there are
bit
things that I
introverted. Yeah.
can't yeah, and there are things that I can't do while with other people. So it's just nice to have some alone time. But I'm making myself out to be a bit of a hermit. I actually am really missing human interaction these days. So okay, I don't think I'm a selfish person, but of course I don't think I'm a selfish person. How could I live my life thinking I'm a selfish person?
It's important to you that you feel like you're a good person.
Of course, yes. Yeah. What kind of person wants to think that they're selfish?
Well, they don't want to think they're selfish, but although people come up with justifications all the time, right?
Right.
If they're being selfish, they have to avoid that bad feeling.
Well, I don't know if I don't know. I have to think about it. Like, what would something that I do that it's selfish be? See, in all
Well,
seriousness, not staying home and depriving other people of my company.
I actually wouldn't know. I'm asking you. I don't think you're a very selfish person. You spread a
I
lot of love
didn't
out
think
there. You
so.
teach. You know,
Yeah.
you put a lot of goodness into the world. You're helping people as a volunteer at the women's clinic, right? At women's
I mean,
center
let's say, yeah, at the women's shelter, but like
shelter.
for again, like self interest because it makes me feel good. All of those things make me feel good.
They do, but you recognize that doing
I
good makes
recognize
you
now
feel
that
good.
yes.
Yeah. So I would argue that at least in the definition that I prefer, you are an altruist
So,
by those
oh,
definitions. I think
okay,
so.
great. I do feel sometimes that I'm selfish with my time, but
Mm.
not to the expense of others,
Well,
just
that's where it
because I
matters.
need
That's
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's the again that seems to be the line there, right?
Okay.
I'm doing this study right starting tomorrow to make money, right? I'm basically doing
Hmm.
it to make money, but
But you're also helping people.
I feel good about it because I'm
Yeah.
also helping people. In fact, everyone's warning me, Josh, why would you do this? You're selling your body for science.
Hmm. Some
which is
people, yeah.
which I guess sounds that way, but then I'm actually able to one, I'm like, I really want the money, but two, I'm able to say, yeah, but you know what? I'm also helping people. I think it's worth the risk also for that reason.
Mm.
That pushes me further to want to do this. You know, the money is a big driver of that and the
Of
fact that I
course,
need
yeah.
money, but doing good and letting that be a driver, like for you, you know, you feeling good for doing good, I think is very telling. And I think that you should try to, you know, understand if you're an empathetic person, whether you want to or not, that's going to be what ultimately is in your best self-interest.
Right.
If you're a psychopath, I understand that if you don't feel any remorse or guilt, then
Psychopaths are listening to this like, what the fuck?
okay, so
You guys are
technically
always
speaking,
shitting on us.
yeah, for them, what's in their self-interest is not going to jail.
Right,
So
exactly. Yeah, that's how they're like, they're the serial killers get away with everything. Or I actually don't know.
yeah,
Is that, yeah.
I was listening to this Louis C.K. bit like just the other day,
Mm.
and he was saying, I think he's like, I'd like to believe that murder being a bad thing and like not wanting to murder other people is like the driving force behind me and others not committing murder. But I'm pretty sure the law against committing murder is the number one thing preventing murder.
Really?
That's what he was arguing. I don't know. That's the
I don't
comedy.
think that's true.
he was
I
like,
don't know.
he's like, I'd like to think that no, murder is wrong. I would never do it.
Yeah.
But I think like primarily the law, and so I don't know if that's the case for normal people or
Yeah.
not, but definitely for psychopaths. The fact that there's a law, he's like, even, or if it was a misdemeanor, instead of, he's like, you get something in the mail and it's like, no, there was a camera.
Yeah, you're right. Some of his jokes aren't as funny now that we know that he's kind of a dick. Sorry.
No.
I'm sorry. No, it's okay. It's okay. I still find him funny. I just don't know because now in my head I'm just like, so is he just upset? Is he upset that he did things or that he got like called out for it? Because that's what he's saying, right?
Is it
It's
what he's
only
saying?
the external punishment that like stops people from
Well, he's
doing
talking about us as
bad
the people
things.
that we all have this little fight in our heads, like how good of a person. He said, "I'd like to think I'm a nice person,
Hmm.
but how much of that is the like avoiding bad consequences?"
Right.
And I would argue that avoiding bad consequences, if that's your only reason, if that's your like primary driving force, then that lends itself more towards selfishness. If it's avoiding a bad
Hmm.
feeling,
Okay.
then that lends itself more towards positive self-interest.
What about people who don't get a bad feeling from not helping? Or like they don't get a good feeling from helping? Not everybody necessarily gets a good feeling from helping, do they? Do they have to be a
Um,
psychopath for that to be true?
I don't think they're a psychopath, but obviously I think that's very tied to empathy. And if you're not feeling that, either you're not exerting
Mm.
that empathy at the moment, maybe you don't consider them to be part. We've talked about this before, but if they're like,
Did you say exerting?
yeah, exerting, like then maybe you're not exerting empathy.
Oh, you're thinking like empathy on it as an outward.
So for example, you can have the capability of empathy, but you still have to exert it. And there's many reasons we do or don't exert empathy, right? So
Mm.
some people, they only exert it for people that they consider to be in their in group.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think we talked about this, I think, a while ago. But basically, because a lot of people, for example, they don't get a bad feeling, let's say, about something happening to someone across the other
Oh,
end of the
right.
planet,
Yes,
right?
that's true. I think we're in our social media thing we were talking
Yeah,
about.
is it
Yeah.
because they're a psychopath? No, it's because they're not either humanizing them or not seeing
Right.
them as the same as themselves, right? They're not putting
Right.
them in their in group. Yeah, I was arguing that
Mm.
we should try to put all of the human beings in our in group.
Right.
I guess it is fair to say, though, for some people that's who are actually extremely empathetic, then you're taking on a lot of pain. So
Yeah.
that's why it's difficult. So you have to kind of turn that faucet on or off for the empathy.
Mm. Yeah.
So technically, there's times when we wouldn't exert it,
Mm.
maybe to protect ourselves. Maybe that's being selfish at times, or maybe that's actually in your self-interest to take care of yourself.
And maybe that's in everyone's.
So I would argue that could be a positive thing. Let's say you need to protect your mental health. It's kind of like putting that oxygen mask on first. You need to protect your mental health. In that case, not you shouldn't be feeling bad about not helping somebody else or something when you're trying to take
Yeah.
care of yourself. But if you have that capability and you're okay, then I would say, yeah, it's natural to feel bad about not helping if you're capable of it.
Mm.
So yeah, it's all very contextual and there's nuance to it for sure.
Of course. And so I have a question for you.
Okay.
Hypothetically, let's say instead of getting paid whatever you're paid for the study and helping to test for HIV drug interactions, instead you're contributing to the testing of mind control drugs.
Oh, something negative.
Something potentially negative. Well, actually, that's
Ooh.
probably almost 100% negative. Yeah.
I
But they
see what
tell
you're
you,
saying.
oh, it has some positive outcomes. And you're like, not really sure.
I mean, I might be inclined to believe that if I'm in need enough. That's a big problem, right? And
Right.
actually, that's what gets a lot of people. And it's important to recognize why a lot of people might do something that we perceive to be negative if they're feeling desperate.
Hmm. Right.
So, would I personally? I mean, I'm not in that situation. I'd like to believe that if I don't need to, I wouldn't do it. If I was in desperate need of money, and I would probably want to believe there's something positive there.
Yeah.
You know,
But it's like, it's kind of sketchy. Like, you don't really know. And you're like, I can't really see how this would be used like in a positive way. Right.
yeah. I mean, there's so many ways people justify stuff like that. Like, if
Right.
not me, somebody's going to be in this study. And I need the money, and then I can use that to do good afterwards.
Right.
Or
Yeah. That's a
there's
classic.
so many ways people start to. But again, what am I doing in all of these cases? I'm trying to avoid the bad feeling
Right.
that I'm going to get if there's a
Mm.
potential negative. So that good or bad feeling is very important.
Yeah.
So the self-interest is in there no matter what. Whether or not it's selfish, that's the question, right?
Well, sometimes selfishness can masquerade as other things. Right.
Like what?
Like, I mean, so let's say it is a study like that, and you're like, oh no, they actually said it's like good for, it's going to help out these and these people. And it's like, if you actually did research on it, you would see that that is not true. This is actually a really bad thing.
Mhm.
And you decide like, oh no, that's just the whatever wing, insert left or right there, propaganda about blah blah blah. And
So
actually,
it sounds like mental gymnastics I'd be
yeah,
doing because I do perceive myself to be a good person
right.
and I don't want to mess with that. But I also want something for myself. So yeah, there's
Yeah,
ultimately I'd be selfish if I knew or there was a good chance that I was doing something very bad there. And it'd be masquerading also a little bit as like, well, I need that oxygen mask thing for me. I need this right now. I can't even do
right.
good if I don't get this, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think it's greed. I don't think it's greed. For example, greed to me is like another level when you really don't need it. But if you need something, then you feel like you're being basically pit your needs against somebody else's needs. That's tough. And yes, I would have some responsibility in that, but also the people who are pitting my needs against somebody else's also have
For
responsibility in that.
sure. But you can't control what they do.
I can't, but it's kind of like telling that person almost a little bit like who's hungry and they go and steal some bread from somebody else.
Mm.
Like that's selfish, but they are also in need.
Right.
So it's not
What about,
okay, but
so you're saying the level of need and the context makes a difference? Because what about like,
it does in how selfish you're being, right? It's not
mm,
just you are then in a sense being selfish because you're doing it without regard for others, but you're also doing it out
right.
of like necessity. For in your mind, you're doing it out of necessity.
What about like working as a, I don't know, like a defense attorney for someone you know is guilty?
Mm.
That kind of thing. It's kind of,
So there again, yeah, there that's very interesting. So like an Alan Dershowitz,
right.
right? There's someone who's like defending the worst of the worst people. Well, I mean, then there's the argument that this is part of a system in which justice is only achieved if we have a fair system of defense, or
But
you
what
give
if
the
you're,
absolute best defense to somebody, regardless. And then if you believe that's your job to do, it doesn't matter whether or not you personally know or believe they're guilty or not. Your
could
job
you
is to
do it?
defend them.
Could you do that?
Could I do it? As much as I love strategy and
Yeah.
trying to like outwit others, I think there's a part of me that really likes that. I don't think I could defend the worst of the worst and feel
No.
okay about that. But
Yeah.
then again, I don't know. If someone's offering me also $1 gajillion to do that, my mind might go through some mental gymnastics in order to justify it. We all like to believe
Mm,
we wouldn't do certain things, but that is something that, that's very human for us to try to justify things if we're getting, we've
right.
all been asked that question. Would you do blank for $1 million?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And suddenly, the more the money goes up, we start questioning our own morals, our own values,
Yeah.
because we start going through hoops like, okay, this is bad, but if I had that kind of money, I could do so much good.
Mm,
Maybe I do one bad thing so that I could do so much more good.
right.
You start making these
Yeah.
you start jumping through these hoops.
Hmm.
So yeah, it gets really nuanced and complicated. So yeah, I don't think that if someone does something selfish, it makes them a bad person, even if the selfish act itself isn't necessarily good.
Mhm.
Yeah. Do you agree?
Um,
You're like, I'm not talking to you again, Josh.
no, I'm like, I mean, I guess I still have a hard time. I think if you also liked what you were doing, I'm trying to like picture being, for example, a defense lawyer for people that I'm pretty sure are mostly like people who should be put away and they're, criminals that get off and then go get out of whatever they were accused of and then
Yeah.
go out and do more things. I don't know that I don't know how they live with themselves. I don't think there's an amount of money that would,
Well, isn't it the prosecution's fault for not doing a good enough job?
well, that's what
All
they
you do
tell
is provide
themselves.
a
But
fair defense.
But if you're so good at your job, why would you put yourself in that position? Like you could be contributing on a better, like I understand if you think they're okay. I understand I'm picking
So
like
you're saying if someone paid you $1 billion to do it, you wouldn't do it, are you?
a billion?
A
I
billion.
mean, I would do it because I'd be a terrible lawyer. So sure, I'll do it.
No, let's say you were a great lawyer.
And I get $1 billion just for
A
defending the
billion.
person, even like
Yeah,
half-assedly. I don't have to do a good job at it.
potentially.
Well, if I can do a really bad job and they'll get convicted, then of course.
Well, let's say you have to do the best job. You have, let's say
The
it's
best job I
your
possibly
best.
can.
Yeah, but for $1 billion.
A billion?
A billion.
I guess I could, if I won it, I could just pay to have the guy like
Get assassinated?
assassinated
What?
afterwards.
See the mental gymnastics we're going through?
You're what?
See what I'm saying? Already. This is how it starts.
Also, we just agreed that it's really not good to kill people. If they did like a horrible thing. I wouldn't pay to get them assassinated. I'd pay to have them locked up in a way that they couldn't do whatever they did. I don't know. Like, what did they do? There's so many things. Are they guilty? Do we all know that? Do I know they're guilty? Like,
You know they're guilty.
I know they're guilty. What are they guilty for?
Yeah. Murder.
Murder?
They're guilty for murder. Yeah. But you're also pretty sure they won't like do it again.
No, I don't need. What do I need $1 billion for? I don't want to. I'm pretty sure they won't do it again. How would they? How would I know that?
Let me ask you, is this conversation that we just had now weighing on your choice just a little bit?
Yeah, probably. Well, because I was thinking while you were talking about that, like, yes, I could do a lot with that kind of money, but I also like, unfortunately, money hasn't been like a very good motivator for me. Like, until I need it, I don't really think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Which
So
is like,
I've been in a place where I've needed it more lately, and I started to feel that, so I can understand when you're in that place of need,
Of course, when I need it, I'm like, oh man, maybe I should have gotten like a normal job and not gone to school for however many years. But like most of the time, I'm like, I don't, what more? Like, I have everything I could need. And I mean, that's like, obviously, I've been working the entire time. It's not like I'm just floating along, but like, I don't need a lot of things. Again, it's just me. So maybe that's why.
No, that's fair to say.
But if I had like,
that might be true right now.
It's true. Exactly. So like if I had, what if I accidentally had like 7 kids, or if I had a
suddenly, or if you were living in America, if you lived in America,
and if I lived in America and
broke your arm,
yeah, exactly, yeah, and something normal happened to me that suddenly put me in thousands of dollars of debt. Yes,
I'm pretty sure you know that show Breaking Bad. The whole point, like,
oh yeah, exactly.
That whole show started because he like couldn't pay for his own cancer treatment in the U.S. or something, and wanted to make a little extra money, so he started selling meth. And there was always this justification: I'm doing it for my family. But then it's like, is he just doing it for his family?
Well, I don't want to.
We're not going to spoil Breaking Bad for people.
No spoilers.
But is he just doing it for his family? Is the question, or is he also doing it for himself?
Yeah, that's actually a really good example.
Breaking Bad is so this question of selfishness versus self-interest is at the core of so many conversations and so much of our media as well. Like, again, Breaking Bad is considered the best show of all time to a lot of people, and that's at the core of this show.
I wouldn't disagree with that. So okay, let's pause here. Not pause, but like, anybody who has not watched Breaking Bad, go and watch it.
Aren't you also sick of people saying to you, oh my God, you haven't seen Breaking Bad? Like, if you're sick of that, just go watch it. Just give in.
If for no other reason than to get people off your back, because that's a good reason.
Are you going to spoil Breaking Bad for the next 30 seconds?
Well, I was just going to discuss it because I think there is a point where what was self-interest for him, or what was not necessarily altruistic, but it was him wanting to help his family. I think there is a clear point where that switches, because he does turn into kind of a villain.
Well, they're saying it's like Mr. Chips turning into Scarface, basically. Like, there's this transition for him over the time. Yeah.
So, I mean, he's actually a good example of both, because there is the self-interest versus selfishness in both. Initially, it is a self-interest thing.
Yeah, he's doing it out of, and that self-interest is
I didn't really spoil anything,
his family, right?
Right.
But it gets more selfish as it goes along, right? It's more about for me without regard for others. That really is what we're talking about when we say selfish.
That's right.
Yeah. And by the way, I should say, like, this trial that I'm doing, why am I doing it? Do I just need money for no reason? Like, no, I just shot a movie, as you know, and the movie cost money. It cost more money than I wanted it to cost. Like, I ended up having to pay more money. Basically, this opportunity came along to help cover those costs and help me in a time that I feel like I'm in need, Of course, that I'm going to want to see the positives in everything I'm doing. I don't think it's that hard to see it here. I think the biggest risk, to be honest, is to myself.
Yeah.
Because I'm using my body as a
this
test
podcast.
Subject.
What if you come back and you're all
you know what? It's kind of this weird thing where has anyone ever accused you of being selfish by potentially harming yourself?
Yes. Oh, wait, accused me? No, I've accused people.
Other people?
When they're doing something that is hurting themselves and they're like, oh no, it's fine. I can handle it. I'm fine. It's like, well, you're not fine. And it's hurting everyone to see you not be fine.
Right.
And you could be fine.
And there's a possibility with the hurting everyone in that, like, in a more obvious sense, but also just like, let's say it's your friend and you're like, you're my friend. I don't want to lose my friend.
Yeah.
Like, you are a positive influence in someone else's life. You're potentially removing that.
Yeah.
Is that selfish?
Right. And if you are doing the study and it hurts you, It's a little selfish because, like, you just convinced me to continue with this podcast, and now you're gonna bail with your. No, I'm just kidding.
By putting myself
By putting
in
yourself in
danger in
some
the
kind of
study.
danger, yeah. No,
I
I'm
was
kidding.
also told, I think my aunt kind of said this to me once because I chose, I'm choosing to live kind of a hard life as I want to be a
Mm,
writer and a director, right? It's not
yeah,
easy. I'm putting my time and energy and money into doing that with hopes that
right.
it'll get bigger. But so I'm actually, it's very difficult for me. But that means I'm choosing not to like go do like a 9 to 5 normal job where I could, which seems a lot more, straightforward. And I was like accused, I think, of basically being selfish
What? But that
for
I
not,
though I
you know what
guess
I
I can
mean?
see. Uh I don't like that though. But it's your
Mhm.
life.
Exactly. That's my life. But,
Yeah.
other people who care about me and are invested in my life,
Well,
to them, that has an impact on them as well.
I hate
So
that. They made a bad
it's,
investment. Deal with it.
well, that's what's frustrating to me a little bit too. And it's sad because I'm being selfish and I'm also living a difficult life on top of that.
Yeah.
So if I just go and, stop pursuing my dreams, which is selfish,
That's so
I'll be able to be unhappy, but have money.
I think there's a big difference between someone like not taking care of their health and someone following their dreams. Like
Yeah.
that seems pretty different to me. And like
Well,
it's
some
not
people would
like you're
argue you're
doing
not
it
taking care of your health.
half-assedly.
Those
But
two can
you
be linked.
you really commit to it. Like you're doing a good job with it. I understand like if
I
someone's
am
like, "Oh
doing
yeah,
this
yeah, I
study to
want to."
help.
Yeah, oh, but even like if someone's like, "Oh yeah, yeah, I want to be a professional dancer," but they don't actually practice ever. And it's like, "Well, you say it, but you don't do anything to
Yeah.
get there. You do everything to get there. It's not like you're half-assing it, right?" Like
Yeah.
so I think there is a difference and like it's
Hmm.
contextual a little bit or like if you're feeding off of someone else's funds or I mean, who
Hmm.
knows?
I
Anyways.
mean, when you look at it's actually a big difference between cultures here a little bit too, right?
Mm,
In our culture, in Western culture, it's not looked badly upon in general to pursue your dreams.
right, we're very individualistic.
And yeah, we're very individualistic in that way. But let's say in more Eastern cultures, you're expected to also provide for your family often,
Mm,
right? Let's say if you're doing that and you don't have money, let's say, there's a part of you that's like, okay, I need to do something that maybe isn't going to make me happy so that I can provide for my family. Otherwise, I'm being
right.
selfish.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
So there is a bit of that tug of war culturally in our
and kind of the
society as
sense of
well.
duty, right?
Yeah, sense of duty. I mean, there's a big struggle there.
But like you don't have kids. You don't have there's no one depending on you for money.
So here's the thing: here in Western culture, we think that we have a duty to our kids,
Oh yeah, and
but
Eastern
we don't
cultures to your
necessarily.
parents.
Eastern
Yeah,
culture,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
also to your parents. It's
Yeah.
to each other in the
Not just
family.
Eastern, by the way. Like
I'm using that very
okay.
broadly. I know
Okay.
I shouldn't use
Okay.
it too broadly. I'm just kind of giving an example of different societies and cultures,
Okay.
and that happens here to a degree as well,
Mm,
right? Like I was just explaining in my own family to a degree, right?
yeah.
There's a certain responsibility that we're expected to have, but so we should say what is considered to be selfish is sometimes very subjective.
Right. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
Sometimes people have that question: am I being selfish if I do this for my own happiness?
Yeah.
You could argue, no, that's actually you. It's kind of like that oxygen mask thing. You need to make
Right.
sure that you're happy. I said my dad is very much cares about me making money. I'll just
Mm,
say that, right? He grew up very poor. He grew up in poverty, basically. He worked very hard for me to have what I have. In my mind, I'm like, okay, so you worked very hard for me to try to be able to pursue my own happiness.
right.
He gets very anxious about me not being able to provide for myself and stuff like that. So I asked him once, I said, so you just want me, all you care about is that I make money then? That's the only thing you want. He's like, no, you need to do something that makes you happy. And I was like, what?
Oh,
He's like, if you don't do something that makes you happy, then what's the point? And I'm like, so what you do for your job, like, and everything that makes you happy? He's like, of course, I wouldn't do it otherwise.
oh
And I was like, oh,
yeah.
this doesn't sound like everything you've said to me before. He's like, he was like an of course thing. He's like, I just think that if you become a
Yeah.
doctor, you're gonna love it as well, and
That's
it's
funny.
gonna make you happy.
My parents told me the same thing, and I was like, "Well, I'm afraid of needles and blood, so I'm not sure how that's going to happen." And then I went,
Yeah.
"Just get a PhD. It's a lot easier." There you
Yeah.
go. Don't bother. Just kidding. Okay.
So you do believe that being, what selfish is considered to be subjective, and
Yeah.
also I think what's maybe this is the final thing we can talk about. What's considered to be self-interested whether something actually is in your self-interest or whether you perceive it to be in your self-interest
Mm.
is something to talk about as well, right?
Well,
We
didn't we just
do.
say that everything is in our self-interest, whether we think it is or not?
So I should say, no, it's not that everything's in your self-interest. It's that everything is you perceive to be in your self-interest.
No, even if you perceive it as what? That's not what we've been saying this whole time.
No,
Anything,
no, no.
even if we see it as selfless, it is ultimately in self-interest. Even the guy jumping on the bomb is in the
You know what I'm
grenade
saying,
is.
but I'm saying that not us. I'm saying the person himself. He
Mhm.
has to perceive. I'm saying just because you perceive something to be in your self-interest doesn't mean it will be when the result comes through, right?
But
You might be
perceive.
doing something
Okay.
for the gaining of a good feeling and then end up not feeling good. You might be
Uh-huh.
wrong,
Okay.
right? So it's important to recognize that like these are
Right.
perceptions. So when we're looking at other people, sometimes we misjudge them because we go, well, that didn't help him or this person at all.
Mm.
He clearly didn't do it for this reason, but it might be important to note that was their intention.
Right. Or maybe they just don't actually know how that person feels. They're just assuming.
Well, exactly. Assuming, so I think it's actually helpful to assume that most people are doing actions that are, again, for the gaining of a good feeling or the avoidance of a bad one. If they're anything like you,
Mm.
again, that's part of empathy.
Yeah.
I think it's easy. It's fair to assume that most people are more similar than not.
Yeah. Right.
So I think it's just important to note that like we're not just talking about it actually being in someone's self-interest. It's that's the intention of the person when they do that action is for it to be in their self-interest.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, that's all I'm
Even
saying.
if they don't consciously know that it's in their intention. They might not
Well,
realize that they're
they might
doing
not.
it
You're
to
right. They
have
might
a
not
good feeling.
consciously. Yes, yes. Sorry, you're looking
That's
at
I
even
think
another
that's what I
level of
meant.
it.
Yeah, we were kind of
Okay, yeah, yeah. They might not even conscious, but still, their body internally, consciously, subconsciously,
okay.
there's an element of it of self-interest in that. But I'm not saying it actually results
Gotcha.
in actually being beneficial. It might not,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
So it's just
All right.
anyway. I guess this is a pretty complex issue.
Yeah. Well, hopefully your study does end up going well.
And it's a win-win-win for everyone,
It's a
right?
win-win-win. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a win for you, a win for
People with HIV
people with H and the people doing the study.
and the people. You know, I will say when she asked when I went in for my screening,
Yeah.
so I was conscious of this, and I don't know if this makes me a bad person or not,
Uh-oh. What's happening
but
here?
like when I went for this screening, I just made sure I figured a lot of people were coming in asking about the money,
Mm.
and I figured she seemed very, this person cares about her study. She was the one like running the study,
Yeah.
and I made sure to ask her like, this is going to help people, right, who have HIV,
Oh,
and
that's so nice.
yeah, I asked her that, and she lit up.
Yeah.
Like when I asked that question, she's like, yeah, that's what we're hoping will happen,
Yeah.
all this stuff. And first of all, that made me feel good to
Right.
see that in her. But I won't lie that I was very aware that like,
You
I'd have a
manipulative
better
dick. No,
chance of
I'm just
also being
kidding.
selected for this. I'd have a better chance of being selected for the study if she saw me as someone who cared more about,
Yeah.
the people than the money.
Although to be fair, you are a person who cares about the people, so it's not like you were misleading her. It is honest, but it was also a little
I
bit
wasn't
like,
misleading her, but I was very aware while I was saying it
right. Yeah.
that there was what it would. So it gets a little
Oh,
complicated,
you're like a
in that
little
sense. I don't think
sociopath.
it's bad.
No, you're not a sociopath. What's the word for that?
Well, it's being a little
Like a
manipulative, but hopefully
Machiavellian.
for
Yeah.
in a good way.
Oh, that's what's a
No, I was
Machiavellian
hoping
thing.
again for a win-win-win.
Yeah. No, everybody wins. Yeah. I also went, aw, when you said that. Like, oh, you care.
Well, it's like knowing what will make somebody feel good
Yeah.
and acting in accordance with that, and then it making you feel good again. But I think that's ultimately what we want. We want the win-wins. We want the win-win-win.
It's a positive
And
feedback
yes,
loop,
that's
but I don't know
self-interested,
if
but it's not
that's.
bad.
Mm.
And by the way, it's important to note that what we do selfishly might not actually be in our self-interest. We didn't say that,
That's a good. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, you
right?
guys who are walking
We're
around being
wrong.
all selfish, you're actually not
Mhm.
helping yourself because everyone knows you're a selfish jerk,
Yeah.
and no one's gonna help you
Well, that's one of the
like
things.
the
But if you
most.
take all the cookies out of the cookie jar, what do? You feel good in the moment that you got the
Yeah,
cookies and you ate the
and then
cookies and you like
bam,
the cookies. But
diabetes.
and then you feel
I
well
should stop making
diabetes
that joke.
and also everybody else will be upset and you'll know
Yeah,
that, so you'll feel bad if you're not a psychopath,
yeah, and you won't have any
right?
friends.
And you won't have any friends. It's like when I pulled that chair out from Daniel Botner and he hit his head.
Yeah,
I don't
and
know. The
our
teacher told
teacher
me
told you you'd never have friends because of this.
it was a selfish thing for me to do at the time, and it was
But you
potentially
didn't know,
I didn't know. I was learning as a kid, you learn. But obviously, it's important to note that being selfish is often not in your self interest.
right?
Yeah, and you want to do what's in your self-interest, which is one, feeling good, doing good.
Good. I like that message. Can we leave with that message for our listeners?
Yeah,
Everybody
let's leave it
go do good. No, but do it
and feel good
because
about
it's
doing
good for
good.
you, not because we're telling you to. And I mean, you shouldn't be listening to us anyways. Like you should listen to us, but not like do what we say. And if you enjoyed listening to that was me trying to
And this has
segue.
been another.
This has been that's how we say it. This has been another episode of Adulthood Friends. If you enjoyed this episode,
What
and
episode number was this?
this was episode number 22.
22. Sorry, I
22.
just wanted to hear you say the number.
Ooh, 22. Yeah. And if you enjoyed this episode or not, you can subscribe. I doubt you would have gotten this far if you didn't enjoy it. Although, actually, I don't know. Maybe you just wanted.
I don't know. Maybe your
to
exercise went on like a really long time.
Yeah, and you're like, and the button to change the song was broken, and you were like, I guess I have to listen to this podcast now. And for some reason, you couldn't.
That's possible.
Take your headphones off or whatever. So, if you were forced to listen to this, I'm sorry, but you should still subscribe.
Yeah, because you know what? It would be, you get a good feeling out of subscribing, right? And then that would be in your self-interest to subscribe. One, because you might get a good podcast to listen to out of it, but you'd also make us feel good. And that would make hopefully you feel good if you're not a psychopath.
Yeah, and if you want to go like, if you want to go above, and we assume you're not a psychopath, but I guess we don't really know. And psychopaths, you're welcome to listen as well. Not really. And you can also tell a friend if you want. And also, what's the other thing that we started doing? Oh, you
can engage in conversation with us too. By the way, we actually had a choice at one time, which we were going to do first: intention versus action. It was a poll. Intention versus action or selfishness.
Yeah.
And I think they were tied for a while, and there was like a tie-breaking vote, which is why we did intention versus action. But that's why we're doing selfishness, right now.
Anyways, at least 3 people were interested in it. So yeah.
Anyway, so you were saying subscribe.
Oh yeah, that was okay.
Subscribe to us, like us on Facebook. What else?
Yeah, do all the things. I don't know how much it really matters. I think the podcasts do this and we're supposed to do it. So don't worry about it. Oh, tell a friend and also engage with us.
Yeah.
If you want to.
We are growing and making us grow more helps.
Surprisingly, people are listening. And you know that because you're listening.
Weren't you going to say to listen on Spotify?
Oh, people know where to listen. Do I have to say that every time? Do people not know? Do you not know what you're listening on, guys?
Well, maybe they're listening on Anchor and they don't realize they can listen on Spotify.
Okay. If you are listening on Anchor and you don't want to listen on Anchor, you want to listen on a normal thing, then open up Spotify. We're on Spotify. Open up Apple Podcasts. We're there too. Or Google Podcasts. Or Overcast.
Like all of them. We're on all of them.
Undercast. Or Pocket Cast. No, I don't know.
Undercast is not a thing. I think you just made that up.
No, there was Overcast and Undercast. I thought I was being funny, but maybe not.
How do we end this episode, Aya?
Yeah, how do we end this thing? I think usually like one of us is talking and the music is sort of... The music, it just sort of cuts us off.
It does?
The music?
Sounds like you're just singing the music. It doesn't sound like it's cutting you off at all.
It's supposed to cut me off.
Well, you're all about the awkwardness. Let's just have this awkwardly continue.
Okay. I'll accept the awkwardness. I'm glad I have this platform on which to express my awkwardness to like 50 people.
Why are you still talking? The music already cut
I don't
you off
know. I don't know. Oh my god, I hate you so much right now, Josh. I don't know how I keep falling for this thing. It's just because you look at me expectantly and I can't like not respond. Okay, I'm done. I'm gonna stop talking now. I'm stopping the recording.